The sky of Virine Prime shimmered with silver clouds that moved like threads across the pale horizon. Beneath that quiet sky, a great ceremony was being prepared. The air was filled with tension and the sound of many voices, some filled with hope, others heavy with fear. The grand hall of the Virine Council stood bright and polished, its crystal pillars glowing with gentle blue light. Every movement, every sound, every breath seemed to carry the weight of something greater than anyone wanted to admit. Lyra stood before a tall mirror, dressed in silver robes that marked her as a daughter of the ruling house. Her hands trembled as she looked at her reflection. She was not afraid of beauty, nor of duty, but of the name she had been told only hours ago, a human name, the one she would soon call husband. Her heart sank every time she heard the word human. For many years, humans had been the shadow in Virine stories, the strangers who came from the dark side of space, bringing war and fire. Her people had fought them, feared them, and finally been forced to make peace with them. The treaty that ended the war demanded one last act of unity, a marriage between both races, a symbol of peace. Lyra had not been asked if she wanted this. She was chosen because of her bloodline, her calm mind, and her ability to speak the human language. The council said she was the perfect choice. Perfect for peace, they said. Perfect for politics. But not once did anyone ask what was perfect for her heart. Her mother entered quietly. She was tall, her eyes shining with a wisdom that had seen too many wars. She placed her hand on Lyra's shoulder. "It is not forever, my daughter," she said softly. "It is only until our worlds stop fearing each other." Lyra wanted to believe her, but fear was not something that disappeared easily. When the time came, Lyra was guided through the grand hall where both Virine and humans waited. The air felt thick with silence. The Virines stood tall, their pale skin glowing faintly under the light, their long robes moving like liquid silk. The humans stood in their dark uniforms, sturdy and serious, their eyes sharp as metal. At the center stood the man she was to wed. His name was Aaron. He was a soldier, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair neatly tied, his expression calm but unreadable. Lyra studied his face. It did not show cruelty, yet it also did not show warmth. He looked like someone carved from stone, shaped by discipline and war. As the ceremony began, voices rose in ritual words. Lyra spoke the vows with trembling lips, the words feeling strange on her tongue. Aaron's voice was steady and deep when he repeated his part. When the final line was spoken, silence fell again. The lights dimmed, then brightened, marking the end of the ceremony. Applause followed, but it felt hollow. Lyra stood beside Aaron, her heart cold and distant. When the guests began to leave, Aaron turned toward her. "I know this is not easy for you," he said quietly. His voice was low, careful, almost gentle. "It is not easy for me either." Lyra looked at him, unsure how to respond. She expected arrogance or command, but his tone carried neither. He looked at her not as a prize of war, but as another person caught in the same web of duty. Still, she could not trust him. "You will not find welcome in my heart," she said firmly. "Do not expect more than what the treaty requires." Aaron nodded once. "Then we begin with honesty." "That is more than I hoped for." The following days were heavy with silence. Lyra traveled with Aaron to the human flagship, a vast metal city floating in space. It was the first time she had left her world. The endless dark outside the windows filled her with unease. Humans moved through the halls in ordered lines, greeting her with cautious respect. Every step echoed against the steel floor. She missed the soft air and glowing plants of her home. Her new quarters were large but cold. Machines hummed quietly around her, and a screen on the wall displayed shifting stars. Aaron had arranged everything to make her stay comfortable, but it still felt strange. He knocked before entering, always asked before speaking, and never raised his voice. That was not what she expected. One evening, as she stood by the window, he approached her with a small box. Inside it lay a flower, real, not artificial. Its petals were a deep shade of blue, glowing faintly under the ship lights. "It grows on Earth," he said. "It's called a sky bloom. It only opens when it senses calm." Lyra hesitated. She had never seen a human gift that was not made of metal or fire. She took the flower carefully. It was fragile, delicate, almost like the light that came from her own world. "Why give this to me?" she asked. He looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "Because you look like someone who could make it bloom." His words stayed with her longer than she expected. That night, when she placed the flower by the window, it opened slowly. Its blue light filled the room with a soft glow. For a moment she forgot she was surrounded by cold steel. Days turned into weeks. Lyra still spoke little, but she began to watch Aaron more closely. He spent long hours helping his crew, fixing small problems, teaching young soldiers. He did not act like the stories told by her people. There was no cruelty in his hands, no hunger for power in his words. When someone made a mistake, he did not shout. He guided them patiently, repeating until they learned. One night, Lyra heard a faint alarm and saw him rushing down the hall to fix a damaged section. She followed quietly and saw him working with his crew, covered in dust, smiling faintly as he worked. It was the first time she saw him look alive. When he returned, she asked him, "Why do you work like that? You could order others to do it." He wiped his hands and replied, "Because peace is not built by orders. It is built by example." The answer unsettled her. No human she had imagined would say that. She began to see cracks in her fear, small openings where doubt crept in. Yet she still felt torn. She wanted to believe he was kind, but trust was a fragile thing. It was hard to erase the memory of what her people had suffered. As the ship moved through space toward the next council meeting, Lyra looked once more at the blue flower. It was still blooming, calm and alive, just as Aaron had said. She wondered if peace could bloom the same way, with care, patience, and the courage to see light in the dark. For the first time since the ceremony, she did not feel trapped. She felt uncertain, but also curious, and deep inside a small thought began to grow. Maybe humans were not only what she had feared, maybe they were something more. The days aboard the human flagship passed slowly for Lyra. Each sunrise felt the same, a soft glow of artificial light spilling through the window of her cabin. The air carried the steady hum of machines, and the metallic scent of the ship never faded. She missed the smell of the open wind and the soft soil of her home. Every corner of the ship reminded her that she was far from everything familiar. Aaron kept his distance most of the time. He seemed to understand that she needed space. He spoke to her only when necessary, and his tone was always calm and respectful. Lyra could not decide if this silence made her feel grateful or lonely. She had expected commands and control, but what she found instead was patience. Still, that patience confused her even more. One morning, as she sat in the observation room, she noticed a small group of human officers working nearby. They were watching her, whispering among themselves. She could hear her name in their quiet voices. When she turned her head, they quickly looked away. A familiar feeling rose in her chest. It was the same feeling she had known back home, being judged, being treated as something strange. Aaron entered a few moments later. The officers straightened quickly. Lyra saw the respect they had for him. He spoke a few firm words, and the men nodded before leaving. When they were gone, Aaron turned to her. "I am sorry if they made you uncomfortable," he said. "They are only curious," she replied quietly. "Your kind has never lived beside mine. Curiosity is expected. Curiosity should never bring unease," he said. "I will remind them of that." His words were simple, but his tone carried weight. It was not anger, only a steady sense of fairness. Lyra found herself watching him for a moment longer than she meant to. He looked tired but strong, as if he carried more than just his duties on his shoulders. Later that day, Aaron invited her to see another part of the ship. She hesitated but agreed. He guided her through long corridors until they reached a wide chamber filled with small trees and plants. The air was warm and smelled of soil. Artificial sunlight shone through panels above. "This is our green deck," he explained. "We grow food here and study plants that can survive in space. Some of these are from Earth. Others were gifts from allied worlds." Lyra walked slowly between the rows of greenery. Her fingers brushed against a leaf. It felt real, alive. She breathed deeply, and for the first time since she left her planet, she felt a little less homesick. "It is peaceful here," she said softly. "It is the only place on the ship where I can think," Aaron replied. "When the engines are silent and the plants move with the air filters, it feels almost like being on land again." Lyra glanced at him. "You miss your home too," he nodded. "Every day. But if my leaving means others can live without war, then it is worth it." His answer lingered in her thoughts. Back on Vereen Prime, she had been taught that humans valued power above all. Yet this man spoke of peace as if it were a personal mission. It was hard for her to believe, but harder still to ignore. Over the next few days, they began to speak more. Sometimes it was about small things. The strange taste of human food, the design of Vereen architecture, the music of both worlds. Other times their talks grew deeper. Lyra learned that Aron had lost his family during the war but never let bitterness guide him. He believed that peace was the only way to honor what was lost. Lyra shared stories of her home too, the glowing forests, the silver lakes that reflected the moons, and the wind that sang through crystal canyons. Aron listened closely. He never interrupted or dismissed her words. When she spoke of her people's fears, he did not defend his own. He simply said, "We were all afraid, and fear makes mistakes easy." One evening, a sudden power failure swept through the ship. Lights flickered and alarms echoed faintly. Lyra felt a tremor under her feet as the engines slowed. Aron immediately activated his wrist communicator, issuing quick orders. "Stay close," he told her. "We will be safe, but I need to check the main control." He led her through the dim corridors. The red emergency lights painted everything in shadow. When they reached the control chamber, human engineers were working quickly to restore systems. Sparks flew from an open panel. Lyra could sense the tension in the air. She saw Aron move among them, calm and clear in his instructions. Every order he gave was precise, every word steady. There was no panic in his voice. Within minutes, the lights brightened again, and the hum of the ship returned. When it was over, Lyra found herself staring at him with quiet admiration. "You do not fear chaos," she said. He smiled faintly. "Fear never helps. Understanding does. You sound like someone who has seen too much war." He looked at her. "Maybe that is why I value peace so much." Something in the way he said it made her chest tighten. It was not pity she felt, but a strange kind of respect. She began to realize that Aron was not the monster she had imagined. He was human, yes, but also kind, patient, and thoughtful. The next morning, Lyra woke to find a message on her table. It was from Aron. Inside the small package was a data crystal with a note that read, "Music from Earth. Maybe it will help you rest." She placed the crystal in the console and listened. Gentle sounds filled the room, strings, wind, and soft rhythm. It felt warm like sunlight through leaves. She closed her eyes and smiled faintly. That night, she joined Aron on the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before them, and the view of space seemed infinite. Neither spoke for a while. The silence was not uncomfortable. It felt peaceful. "When I was a child," Lyra said, "I used to believe that stars were living souls watching us." Aron turned his head slightly. "Maybe they are. Maybe every star is someone's hope waiting to be seen." She looked at him and felt the weight of her fear slowly fading. In that quiet moment, she understood something new. The wall between her and the human world was not made of metal or law. It was made of fear, and like any wall, it could fall if someone cared enough to break it from both sides. As the ship drifted through the dark sea of stars, Lyra found herself wondering what kind of person Aron truly was beneath his calm surface. She did not yet love him, but for the first time she did not fear him either. She only wanted to understand, and somewhere deep inside, a fragile connection began to grow. Fragile but real, like a flower blooming in the heart of a machine. The human flagship continued its long journey through the stars. Each day, peace talks were held between human and Vereen delegates through secure transmissions. Aron often joined those meetings while Lyra watched from a distance. She had begun to understand more about the human side of the Alliance, yet she still felt like an outsider. The crew treated her with respect, but there was always a gap between courtesy and comfort. One evening, as she sat in the green deck surrounded by small trees, the lights above flickered. It was a minor thing at first, but the sound of distant alarms followed soon after. She stood quickly, feeling the vibration under her feet. The ship had never sounded like that before. Aron entered moments later, his uniform unbuttoned at the collar, his face serious. "There is a problem," he said. "A Vereen warship is approaching." "It is not part of the treaty fleet," Lyra froze. "A Vereen ship attacking this vessel would break the peace completely." "Why would they risk that?" "They are rebels," Aron said. "They reject the treaty and believe the marriage dishonors their kind." The alarms grew louder. Through the windows, Lyra saw distant flashes of light. The enemy ship fired warning shots that grazed the outer shields. Aron spoke quickly into his communicator, giving calm but firm orders to the crew. She could see no fear in his eyes, only focus. When the ship shook again, Aron looked at her. "You should stay in the secure room until this is over." Lyra shook her head. "If they are Vereen, they will listen to me." Let me speak to them. He hesitated. If you do that, you might become their target. They will see you as a traitor. I already am one in their eyes, she said. But if I can stop this, I must try. Aaron studied her for a moment, then nodded. Very well. I will take you to the bridge. The two of them walked quickly through the corridors, the ship trembling under each shockwave. Crew members saluted Aaron as they passed. Lyra saw fear in some faces, but they all moved with purpose. When they reached the bridge, screens showed the enemy vessel closing in. Its dark shape filled the view like a shadow against the stars. The communication officer turned toward Aaron. They are demanding we surrender the Vereen bride. Aaron looked at Lyra. They will not have you, she stepped forward. Open a channel. I will speak, the officer obeyed. The screen flickered, revealing the image of a Vereen commander, his pale skin marked by battle scars, his expression hard. Lyra of the High House, he said sharply, you stand among our enemies. You have chosen them over your blood. I chose peace, Lyra answered. You fight for pride, not for our future. The commander's voice rose. Peace is weakness. Humans will rule over us once you open the door. Aaron spoke calmly beside her. If we wanted to rule, we would have done it long ago. We are not your masters. We are your allies. The commander's eyes narrowed. A human pretending to speak for peace. I will not listen. The screen cut off. Moments later, another explosion shook the ship. The lights flickered again, and one of the officers shouted, Shields down to 60%. Aaron turned to his team. Prepare defensive maneuvers. Focus power on the forward shield. Then he looked at Lyra. You should go now. It is not safe here, Lyra refused. If I leave, they will keep attacking. Let me send a direct message to their crew. Maybe not all of them agree with their leader. He hesitated but trusted her judgment. She stood before the console and spoke clearly. This is Lyra of the Vereen Council. I ask any among you who still honor life to listen. We are not your enemies. The war ended because both sides suffered. Do not destroy the peace we built with your anger. Her voice carried across the channels. For a few seconds, the attack stopped. The bridge grew quiet. Then a final shot hit the outer hull, shaking the ship again before the enemy vessel began to retreat. The crew cheered softly, but Lyra felt no joy. She knew that her people had just called her a traitor. When the danger passed, Aaron turned to her. You saved many lives today. Lyra looked at him, her expression mixed with sadness and relief. I only spoke the truth, but my people will not forgive me, he replied. Then you are braver than they know. Later that night, Lyra sat in her cabin. The sound of repairs echoed faintly through the walls. Her reflection in the window looked different to her now. She had acted not as a representative, but as herself. For the first time, she had chosen to protect humans. There was a knock at her door. Aaron entered, holding a tray with 2 cups of warm tea. He set it down on the table. You should rest, he said. You handled more pressure today than most officers ever face, she smiled faintly. You brought tea for me? It helps calm the nerves, he said. Old Earth habit. She took the cup. The taste was strange but soothing. You trusted me today, she said quietly. I did, Aaron replied. Because you trusted me first when you stayed by my side on the bridge. She looked down at her cup. I did not realize I was doing that. He smiled a little. Sometimes trust begins before we see it. For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the soft hum of the ship. Outside the window, stars drifted by like quiet watchers. Do you think your people will attack again? She asked. I think some still fear what they do not understand, Aaron said. But fear fades when courage takes its place. Lyra studied him. There was something steady about him, something she had not seen in anyone before. He was strong without being cruel, kind without being weak. His presence filled the room with calm. She realized that the walls she had built inside her heart were beginning to fall. The man she had once feared now felt like her only point of safety in this vast and silent world of metal. Before leaving, Aaron looked at her one last time. Tomorrow we begin repairs. After that, we will head for the Joint Council Station. Rest well, Lyra, you have earned it. When the door closed, she leaned back against her seat and stared at the stars. The thought came to her quietly like a whisper. The human she had been forced to marry had risked his life for her, had listened to her voice when others doubted. He had treated her with respect even when she had shown him only distrust. For the first time, she no longer wondered why fate had chosen her for this union. She began to think that maybe the stars had not placed her here by mistake. The flower on her table still glowed faintly blue under the soft cabin lights. Its petals were open wide, calm and alive, just like the fragile trust growing between them. And as the ship drifted quietly through the endless sea of space, Lyra whispered to herself that perhaps peace was not written in treaties but in moments like this, when two souls from different worlds chose to believe in each other. The days after the attack passed with quiet tension. The ship floated through the calm of space, its crew working hard to repair what had been damaged. Lyra often watched them from the observation deck. Humans were different from her people in so many ways, yet there was something admirable about how they worked together. Even after facing danger, they did not complain. They laughed, helped each other, and moved forward. Aaron spent long hours with the engineering teams. He seemed tireless, always fixing problems, always listening to his crew. When he returned to his quarters late at night, his uniform was often marked with grease and his steps were heavy. Still, he never lost his calm. Lyra noticed that every time he saw her, his tired expression softened a little. One evening, she joined him in the green deck. The plants there were brighter than before, their leaves swaying gently in the recycled air. The light from the panels gave the place a warm glow. Aaron was checking a small water system, adjusting its flow. When he noticed her, he smiled. "I thought you might want some quiet," he said. "This is my favorite place on the ship," Lyra replied. "It feels alive here," he nodded. "It reminds me of Earth. My mother used to keep a small garden. She said green things keep people kind." Lyra tilted her head. "Was your mother a soldier too?" "No," Aaron said softly. "She was a teacher. She taught me that understanding others is a kind of strength." Lyra looked at the plants. "My mother used to say peace is not given. It must be kept like a fire, always watched and cared for." They both stood silently for a while, the only sound being the quiet hum of the air system. The moment felt gentle, almost fragile. After some time, Lyra spoke again. "I have been thinking about what happened during the attack. If I had not spoken, maybe we would not have survived. But now the rebels know I am on this ship. They will see me as a traitor." Aaron turned to her. "You made a choice that saved lives. If that makes you a traitor to some, then they do not understand what courage means." Lyra met his eyes. "You speak of courage as if it is easy." He smiled faintly. "It is not easy, but it is necessary. Without it, nothing changes." His words stayed in her thoughts long after she returned to her room. That night, she found herself unable to sleep. She walked through the empty halls of the ship, the lights dim and quiet. When she reached the main viewing deck, she found Aaron already there, standing by the glass wall watching the stars. "I could not sleep," she said softly. "Me neither," he replied. "Too much on my mind." They stood side by side, gazing at the endless sky. The stars looked peaceful, distant, and full of mystery. Lyra asked, "Do you ever think the universe watches us?" Aaron smiled. "Maybe it does. Maybe it waits to see if we learn from our mistakes. I hope it has patience then," she said with a small laugh. He turned to her and looked at her for a moment. "You have changed since the day we met. You used to look at me with fear." "I still do," she admitted quietly. "But it is not fear of you anymore. It is fear of what I might feel." Aaron did not answer at first. He only nodded slowly. "Feelings are powerful. They can build bridges or break them. But when they are honest, they make life real." His voice was calm, but Lyra could sense the weight behind his words. She had seen him risk his life, command a crew, and speak with reason during danger. But this side of him was different. It was gentle and sincere. As days passed, their bond deepened in small ways. They shared meals together, traded stories of their childhood, and sometimes simply sat in silence, comfortable in each other's presence. Lyra found herself laughing more, smiling more. The crew noticed too. They respected her now, not only as the ambassador's wife, but as someone who had proven her bravery. One morning, the ship received a message from the Human-Verine Joint Council. They were asked to attend the renewal meeting for the treaty at the Central Station. The station was a massive structure orbiting a neutral planet, where both species would gather to confirm the peace agreement. Lyra's heart filled with both excitement and worry. She knew the council would question her, perhaps even accuse her for speaking against her own kind. Still, she was ready to face them. Aaron promised to stand beside her. When the ship arrived, the vast view of the station filled the window. It was shaped like a ring of light around a blue world. The moment they stepped inside, representatives from both sides greeted them. Lyra felt the old tension return, the same cold looks from some Virine faces, the same cautious glances from certain humans. During the council meeting, she sat beside Aaron as the leaders spoke. The human general praised the bravery shown during the rebel attack, but one Virine elder rose and pointed toward Lyra. "You acted without the council's command," the elder said sharply. "You spoke to the rebels as if you were one of them." Lyra stood calmly. "I spoke to save lives. If peace must depend on silence, then it is not real peace." Her voice echoed through the hall. There was a murmur among the crowd. Aaron stood beside her, his presence steady like a shield. "She is right," he said. "True peace is built by those who dare to believe in it, not by those who hide behind walls." The discussion continued for hours. In the end, the council decided to honor their actions, acknowledging that their choices had prevented a new war. When the meeting ended, Lyra and Aaron walked out together into the open viewing corridor. The planet below shone in blue light, calm and beautiful. "You spoke well," Aaron said. "Your people will remember your courage," she smiled gently. "I could not have done it without you," he shook his head. "You already had the strength. I only reminded you to use it." They stood quietly for a moment, watching the light of the planet reflect across the glass. Lyra turned toward him and said softly, "When I first met you, I thought this marriage would be a prison. Now it feels like something else. What does it feel like?" he asked. She looked at him with calm eyes. "It feels like a beginning," Aaron smiled. "Then let us build from it." That night, back on the ship, Lyra placed the blue flower near the window again. Its petals glowed brighter than before, reflecting the soft starlight. She thought about how far they had come, from fear to trust, from silence to understanding. She realized that Aaron had changed not only her view of humans, but also her view of herself. She was no longer the frightened daughter of a ruling house. She was someone who had faced doubt, danger, and truth and had found her strength. As the stars drifted outside, Lyra whispered a quiet thought to herself. Peace was not born in grand halls or written on cold paper. It was born in the hearts of those who chose kindness when hate was easier. And standing beside Aaron, she knew that choice was one she would keep making. The joint station glowed like a crown of light in the darkness of space. Ships from both humans and Virine moved in steady lines around it, symbols of peace that only months ago had seemed impossible. Inside, the air was filled with quiet voices, laughter, and cautious hope. It was the day of the treaty renewal, a day that would decide the future of both worlds. Lyra stood before the wide mirror in her cabin aboard the human flagship. She wore a simple gown made of soft silver fabric, the same color as the first robe she had worn on her wedding day. But today she felt nothing like the fearful woman she once was. The mirror showed not a reluctant bride, but someone calm, steady, and certain of her path. The mark of the Virine crest shone faintly on her wrist, a reminder of where she came from and what she still stood for. Aaron entered quietly. His uniform was neat, his expression composed as always, yet his eyes softened when they met hers. "You look ready," he said. "I hope I am," she replied. "It feels strange to stand before both worlds knowing that they will judge every word I speak." "They will listen," Aaron said with confidence. "You have earned that much," she smiled faintly. "You always believe in me more than I do myself. Then perhaps I am only reminding you what is already true," he said gently. Together they walked through the long corridors toward the docking bay. Crew members saluted as they passed, both human and Virine. Many of them whispered quiet blessings. The sight made Lyra's heart warm. Once she had felt alone on this ship, but now it felt like home. When they reached the grand hall of the station, hundreds of delegates from both species filled the seats. The room was built of glass and silver steel, with the stars shining beyond the ceiling. The air carried the quiet hum of translation devices, but everyone waited in respectful silence. The council leader, a tall human woman with gray hair, stepped forward first. "We gather here today not only to renew our peace, but to honor those who proved that peace can live through courage. Lyra of the Virine and Captain Aaron of Earth stand before us as living proof of what understanding can achieve." Lyra felt her chest tighten with emotion. The words were kind, but the moment felt heavy with responsibility. When the time came, she rose and walked to the center platform. The light above her glowed softly as she began to speak. Months ago, she said, her voice clear, I stood in fear of this very union. I believed humans were dangerous, proud, and unkind. My people told me stories filled with anger and pain, and I believed them. But then I met a man who showed me something different. He did not demand respect. He earned it through patience, through kindness, and through actions that spoke louder than words. She paused, glancing toward Aaron. He watched her quietly, his eyes steady. I have learned that peace is not made by treaties alone. It is made by those who choose to see beyond difference. Humans and Virine share the same hopes, the wish for safety, for family, for a world where no child grows up fearing the stars. Today I do not speak as a Virine noble or as the wife of a human. I speak as someone who has learned that we are more alike than we ever believed. The hall was silent. Even the air seemed still. Then soft applause began to rise, spreading through the room until it filled every corner. The council leader nodded with respect. Aaron stepped forward next. His voice was calm but strong. For generations we fought because we did not understand each other. Fear built walls between us, but it is courage that can tear them down. Peace is not weakness. It is the strength to look an enemy in the eye and see a person instead. Lyra once feared me, yet she trusted me enough to stand by my side in battle. That trust saved not only this ship, but the hope of 2 worlds. The applause grew louder. For a moment, both of them stood together under the bright light, surrounded by humans and Virine alike. It was no longer just a ceremony. It was a promise that both sides could see and believe in. After the meeting ended, Aaron and Lyra stepped outside onto the observation platform. The planet below glowed like a blue gem, clouds moving slowly across its surface. The sight was peaceful and endless. Lyra leaned on the railing, breathing in the cool recycled air. Do you think they will truly keep the peace this time? She asked softly. Aaron looked at the stars. If even a few of them believe what we said today, then yes. Change begins with one voice. And today they heard 2, she smiled gently. You always know how to find hope. Hope is easy when you have someone to share it with, he said. They stood quietly for a while, the silence between them filled with unspoken meaning. The glow of the stars reflected in Lyra's eyes. She thought about everything that had happened, from fear and doubt to trust and understanding. She thought about how this man beside her had never once treated her as less than equal, how he had respected her strength even before she saw it herself. Aaron, she said softly, when I first met you, I wished to escape this bond. Now I cannot imagine walking any path without you. He turned toward her, and I cannot imagine facing the stars without you beside me. Their hands met gently. It was not a gesture of duty, but one of quiet truth. Later that evening, the crew held a small celebration on the ship. Lyra and Aaron joined them in the green deck, where the air was filled with laughter and the soft scent of growing leaves. The blue flower that Aaron had given her long ago was placed at the center of the table, still blooming brightly. A young officer asked Lyra, "Do you think peace will last forever?" She smiled. Nothing lasts forever. But what we build with kindness can last longer than fear ever could. The crew nodded, their faces lit by the soft light of the plants. For that night, no one thought of war or politics. They only thought of how far they had come. When the celebration ended, Lyra returned to the observation deck one last time. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass. Aaron joined her, standing quietly by her side. "What will you do now?" he asked. She looked at the stars. "I will keep speaking for peace. There are still minds to change, still hearts to reach, and I will help you," he said. "Wherever we go, we will go together." She smiled, feeling calm and strong. Together, then. They stood watching the horizon of space, 2 figures from different worlds who had found understanding in each other. The darkness of war was behind them, and before them lay an open sky filled with endless possibilities. Lyra reached out her hand toward the stars. "The universe feels wide again," she said softly. Aaron nodded. It always was. We only needed to see it without fear. And as the ship glided gently through the sea of stars, the blue flower in their cabin stayed open, glowing softly in the light of distant suns, a quiet symbol of what they had built together. A peace not forced by power but born from trust. A promise across worlds that even in the vastness of space, humanity could still be kind.